Dear learners, I welcome you all to another video session of the MOOC on rural development in India. In this session, we shall discuss Unit 26 of Module 8, which is titled Introduction to Rural Government Structures and Governance. In this video, we shall discuss the various dimensions of rural governance in India, focusing on the evolution of rural governance structures and institutions in India from the ancient to the contemporary period. Rural governance in India, to begin with, is a crucial component of the country's democratic and developmental framework. With nearly two-thirds of India's population residing in rural areas, effective governance structures at the grassroots level are essential for ensuring inclusive development, social justice, and efficient delivery of public services. Rural governance refers to the processes, institutions, and mechanisms through which local communities participate in decision making, manage local resources, and oversee the implementation of developmental programs, making governance more responsive to local needs. Central to this system is the Panchayati Raj institutions, or PRIs in India, a three-tier structure of local government embedded in the Constitution through the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act 1992. The PRIs are reflective of the spirit of democratic decentralization, facilitating transfer of power, authority, and accountability from central and state governments to elected local bodies to enhance grassroots participation, efficiency, and transparency. Rural governance in India has deep historical roots. Local self-government in the villages existed even in ancient and medieval times, although in different forms. In ancient India, rural governance revolved around self-sufficient village communities that acted as basic units of administration. Villages commonly held a Gram Sabha or village assembly composed of elders and influential residents who collectively made decisions on matters related to land, agriculture, irrigation, and community welfare. These assemblies also settled disputes and enforced social norms, ensuring order and cooperation within the community. The village headman, sometimes called the Gramak, served as a link between the village and the higher administrative authorities, particularly for collecting taxes and maintaining records. This structure gave villages substantial autonomy and helped maintain stability. During the Mauryan period, from the 4th century to the 2nd century BC, the state established a more organized administrative system, but still respected the autonomy of rural bodies. The Mauryan administration appointed officials like Gopas and Sthaniks to supervise cluster of villages, maintain law and order, and collect revenue. Kautilya's Arthashastra mentions village officials responsible for agriculture, irrigation tanks, forest management, and cattle. In the Gupta period, from the 4th century to the 6th century AD, rural administration became more decentralized, with village councils assuming greater responsibilities in managing local resources, resolving disputes, and coordinating agricultural operations. The state intervened minimally, allowing villages to function independently. The Chola period, from the 9th century to the 13th century AD, is considered one of the most advanced phases of rural governance in Indian history. The Cholas developed a highly organized and democratic system of local government through institutions such as the Ur, which was actually a common village assembly, the Sabha, which was an assembly of Brahmins, and Nagaram, an assembly of merchants. These bodies were responsible for maintaining irrigation systems, managing village lands, overseeing schools and temples, organizing public works, and administering finances. The famous Kudavolai system, which involved selecting members through a lottery method, ensured impartial representation and reduced dominance by powerful families. This period stands out as an example of sophisticated participatory governance. In medieval Assam, long before formal Panchayati Raj institutions emerged, Namghars founded by the great Neo-Vaishnavite saint Srimanta Shankardeva nurtured a culture of grassroots democracy, social accountability, and collective responsibility. Namghars have historically functioned not only as religious centers but also as important institutions of democratic decentralization in Assam. As community-managed spaces, Namghars provide a forum where villagers collectively gather to deliberate in social issues, resolve disputes, organize cultural activities, and take decisions through consensus. During the Delhi Sultanate and Mughal Empire, rural governance became more centralized, though village institutions continued to function at the grassroots. The village headman, known as Mukaddam or Patel, and the accountant, known as Patwari or Kanungo, were key figures in local administration. Their responsibilities included tax collection, maintaining land records, and resolving minor disputes. The Mughal emperors, particularly Akbar, developed a systematic revenue administration through officials like amils and karoris, which strengthened state control over villages. Yet, despite increased central authority, villages remain largely self governing in everyday matters, preserving their traditional role in social regulation and resource management. During the early phase of British rule in India, traditional village panchayat, which had functioned effectively for centuries, began to decline. The British introduced a highly centralized administrative system focused primarily on revenue collection. The traditional panchayats lost their autonomy because the colonial authorities placed village administration under district collectors and revenue officials. The emphasis on land revenue through systems like Jamindari, Rayatwari, and Mahalwari disrupted community based governance, weakened local leadership, and eroded the self sufficient character of village society. As a result, rural governance became increasingly bureaucratic rather than community driven. Recognizing the limitations of over centralization, British administrators gradually began to experiment with local government. The most important early step was the Ripon Resolution of 1882, often called the Magna Carta of local self government in India. It emphasized decentralization, elected local bodies, and greater participation of Indians in local affairs. Although primarily aimed at urban municipalities, the principles influenced rural governance as well. District boards and local boards were established to manage rural education, sanitation, roads, and public health. However, these bodies suffered from limited powers, inadequate finances, and tight control by British officials. The first systematic attempt to understand and reform rural local institutions came through the Royal Commission on Decentralization, set up in 1907. The Commission acknowledged the importance of village panchayats and recommended their revival as units of local administration. It stressed the need for democratic participation, judicial functions at the village level, and decentralized responsibilities. Based on its recommendations, several provinces enacted laws to re establish village panchayats. However, these bodies were mostly advisory rather than authoritative, as the British administration continued to retain major powers related to revenue, law, and order. The Government of India Act 1919 gave a new push to local self government by making it a transferred subject, thereby placing local bodies under the control of Indian ministers responsible to the provincial legislative councils rather than to British officials under the system of diarchy. This allowed greater involvement of Indians in rural governance. The Government of India Act 1935 further expanded provincial autonomy and encouraged provincial legislatures to strengthen panchayat laws. By the 1930s, many provinces, including Bombay, Madras, and the United Provinces, had established legally recognized panchayats responsible for minor judicial functions, sanitation, and rural development works. However, even with these reforms, panchayats remained financially weak, dominated by rural elites, and subject to bureaucratic interference, preventing them from becoming effective institutions of grassroots governance. The Constituent Assembly of India, that was constituted to draft a constitution for India, examined the issue of rural governance in India at length. Several committees of the Constituent Assembly examined the role of rural governance. The Union Powers Committee, Provincial Constitution Committee, and especially the Drafting Committee deliberated on the issue of decentralization. The Assembly also considered the 1949 recommendations of the Conference of Ministers of Local Government, which supported democratic local bodies. Though many members wanted panchayats to be given constitutional status, the dominant opinion was that local self-government should remain primarily a state subject, allowing provinces flexibility to design their own systems. This led to a compromise where rural local bodies were acknowledged but not made mandatory in the Constitution's original framework. Thus, the new Constitution, enforced on January 26, 1950, gave constitutional importance to Panchayati Raj institutions, or PRIs, by including them in the directive principles of state policy under Article 40 of the Constitution. But it abstained from giving constitutional status to it. Article 40 of the Directive Principles of State Policy directs the state to take steps to organize village panchayats and endow them with such powers and authority as may be necessary to enable them to function as units of self-government. Although not enforceable, Article 40 reflected the Assembly's intent to strengthen village governance gradually. By placing panchayats in the directive principles, the framers of the Indian Constitution signaled their importance but left the details to the discretion of state legislatures. After India gained independence in 1947, the newly formed government recognized that rural development would be central to the nation's progress. Nearly 80% of the population lived in villages, yet rural areas suffered from poverty, illiteracy, poor health services, feudal power relations, and lack of people's participation in governance. The early decades of independence thus focused on experimenting with various administrative and developmental models to create effective institutions at the village level. Strengthening rural governance was seen as essential for both democracy and socio-economic transformation. To strengthen democracy at the grassroots, several committees, constitutional amendments, and government programs gradually shaped rural governance. Today's Panchayati Raj system is a result of this long evolution. In the early years, rural governance relied primarily on community development programs, which was launched in 1952, and the National Extension Service launched in 1953. After independence, the country adopted the 5-year plan for the economic growth and prosperity of rural India. A key initiative of the first 5-year plan from 1951 to 1956 was the Community Development Program, or CDP, launched on October 2, 1952, to transform rural life through people's participation, covering agriculture, education, and health. In 1953, the National Extension Service was launched with the aim of strengthening community development efforts in rural India, while the Community Development Program was introduced as an intensive pilot-level development initiative in selected areas. The National Extension Service aimed to extend similar development activities to the entire country. In 1957, the Balwan Rai Mehta Committee was appointed to assess the functioning of the Community Development Program at the National Extension Service. The committee found that people's participation in these initiatives was minimal. The committee observed that village panchayats were hardly involved in planning or implementing development programs. As a result, the thrust of rural development had remained largely bureaucratic rather than participatory. The committee concluded that development programs could not be successful without democratic decentralization. To address these shortcomings, the Balwan Rai Mehta Committee strongly recommended the devolution of power, the decentralization of administrative machinery, and the creation of institutions that could ensure meaningful participation of the people. It proposed that development administration must shift from a centralized top-down approach to one rooted in local self-government. For this purpose, the committee suggested the establishment of a 3-tier structure of Panchayati Raj institutions: the village panchayat at the village level, the panchayat samiti at the block level, and the Zilla Parishad at the district level. This structure was designed to facilitate coordinated planning, effective supervision, and democratic decision-making at all levels of rural governance. Rajasthan became the first state in India to introduce this 3-tier Panchayati Raj system in 1959, marking a significant milestone in India's democratic evolution. Other states followed gradually, adopting the model in various forms. The introduction of PRIs ushered in a new phase in India's federal democratic polity by institutionalizing grassroots democracy and giving rural communities a formal voice in development administration. During the initial years, particularly until the mid-1960s, the Panchayati Raj institutions, especially the Gram Panchayats, sometimes referred to as tiny legislatures, functioned effectively. They played a crucial role in mobilizing local resources, implementing development schemes, and fostering a sense of political participation among rural citizens. However, over time, the Panchayati Raj institutions, or PRIs, began to encounter several challenges. These included inadequate financial autonomy, over-dependence on state governments, political interference, and the failure to conduct regular elections. As a result, the momentum gained during the early years of Panchayati Raj began to weaken. Subsequently, with an aim to suggest measures for effective functioning of PRIs, the government appointed various committees from time to time. First to come was the Sadiq Ali Committee in 1964 to oversee the progress in decentralization and grassroots democracy in Rajasthan. The next major committee constituted was the Ashok Mehta Committee, appointed by the Junta government in 1978 to assign meaningful role to Panchayati Raj institutions and to revitalize them. The committee recommended a two-tier system of Panchayati Raj system, namely the Mandal Panchayats and the Jila Parishad. The recommendations given by the committee evoked mixed response from different states. Some states were not eager to introduce Panchayati Raj system based on the recommendations made by the Ashok Mehta Committee, while states like Kerala, Karnataka, Maharashtra, and West Bengal came forward to establish panchayats at local levels. In the 1980s, the expansion of anti-poverty programs and creation of district rural development agencies, DRDAs, and other rural development bodies led to fragmentation in development administration. This made it necessary to integrate Panchayati Raj institutions with development planning. To address these issues, C.H. Hanumantha Rao Working Group on District Planning was set up in 1983 to suggest a framework for district level planning. Subsequently, the G.V.K. Rao Committee was constituted in 1985 to review administrative arrangements for rural development and poverty alleviation programs. The committee highlighted the marginalization of PRIs and recommended regular elections, strengthening of Jila Parishads as the principal planning and development agencies. Another important committee under the chairmanship of the distinguished jurist L.M. Singhvi was set up in 1986 to examine the revitalization of Panchayati Raj institutions. The committee recommended constitutional recognition for PRIs, reorganization of villages to create viable Gram Panchayats, and measures to improve the financial and administrative capabilities. The Sarkaria Commission on Center-State Relations, established in 1988, also observed that local self-governing bodies were functioning poorly and needed strengthening. Subsequently, the Thungan Committee, set up in 1988-89, made extensive recommendations, including constitutional status for PRIs, regular and timely elections, clearer devolution of powers, establishment of district planning committees, and strengthening of financial arrangements for Panchayati Raj. During the period of the Rajiv Gandhi government, serious efforts were made to reconstruct and strengthen local governments in rural and urban areas. Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi initiated a constitutional amendment process to revitalize Panchayat Raj. In 1987 and 1988, a series of national and regional conferences and workshops on responsive administration were organized, involving district collectors and senior administrators. These consultations emphasized the need to decentralize functions, powers, and authority to local governments to make them strong and effective. Rajiv Gandhi introduced the 64th Constitutional Amendment Bill in 1989 to constitutional status on Panchayati Raj institutions. Although the bill was passed in the Lok Sabha, it failed in the Rajya Sabha and lapsed with the fall of his government. Later, the P.V. Narasimha Rao government successfully enacted the Panchayati Raj system through the Constitution 73rd Amendment Act 1992, which came into force on 24th April 1993, a historic milestone for local self-government in India. The 73rd Amendment gave constitutional recognition to PRIs by inserting Part 9 and adding the 11th schedule. A panchayat was defined under Article 243B as an institution of self-government for rural areas. The Act provided for village, intermediate and district level panchayats, with the intermediate tier being optional for states with a population not exceeding 20 lakh. The Gram Sabha, consisting of all registered voters in a village, was also given statutory recognition. The amendment mandated regular elections every 5 years, proportional reservation for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, and not less than one-third reservation for women, including in chairperson positions. Following the enactment of the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act in 1992, all state governments were required to amend the existing Panchayati Raj laws or enact new ones within 1 year to align with the new constitutional provisions. Most states passed their conformity acts in 1993 and 1994, introducing a uniform three-tier structure constituting of Gram Panchayats, intermediate panchayats, and Zilla Parishads, with 33% reservation for women and proportional representation for scheduled castes and tribes. Panchayati Raj institutions now handle 29 subjects listed in the 11th schedule of the Indian Constitution, which include subjects like agriculture, minor irrigation, animal husbandry, fisheries, social forestry, small scale industries, rural housing, drinking water, roads, bridges, education, among others. State election commissions ensure regular elections to the Panchayati Raj institutions, while state finance commissions recommend measures to strengthen the financial status of Panchayati Raj institutions. The National Democratic Alliance government, led by Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee, further emphasized decentralization by convening a two-day national conference of Panchayat heads on 5th and 6th April 2002 in New Delhi. The Prime Minister underlined the need to strengthen grassroots institutions by devolving more powers and resources to PRIs. Panchayati Raj institutions, or PRIs, in contemporary times are undergoing a shift from being merely administrative agencies to becoming proactive institutions of self-government, focusing on digital transformation, inclusive planning, and sustainable development. Efforts are being made to enhance the role of the Gram Sabha, or the village assembly, in approving plans, identifying beneficiaries, and conducting social audits. The government launched the Rashtriya Gram Swaraj Abhiyan, or RGSA, in 2018, which has been revamped for implementation during the period covering financial year 2022-2023 to 2025-2026 in co-terminus with the 15th Finance Commission. The objectives and key features of the revamped Rashtriya Gram Swaraj Abhiyan are as follows: developing the capacity of elected representatives of PRIs for leadership roles to enable the Gram Panchayats to function effectively as the third tier of government, strengthening Gram Sabhas to function effectively as the basic forum of people's participation within the Panchayat system, promoting e-governance and other technology-driven solutions to enable good governance in Panchayat administrative efficiency. Promoting e-governance and other technology-driven solutions to enable good governance in panchayats. Promoting devolution of powers and responsibilities to panchayats according to the spirit of the Constitution and provisions of the Panchayats Extension to Scheduled Areas, or PESA Act 1996. On the digital front, several e-governance initiatives have been undertaken by the government to ensure efficiency and transparency in functioning of the PRIs. Some such schemes include the Swamitva scheme, which uses drones for mapping rural land to provide global property cards. E-Gram Swaraj, which is an integrated portal for online planning, accounting, and monitoring of panchayat activities. Subhasar, which is an AI-powered tool launched in August 2025 to record and summarize Gram Sabha proceedings in 14 languages. Gram Manchitra, a geospatial planning app allowing planning at the local level. Meri Panchayat app, a mobile platform that provides citizens direct access to local data and services. Further, the government has made an effort to align the PRIs with Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, in terms of localization of SDGs. In this context, the Ministry of Panchayati Raj has revamped the National Panchayat Awards to align with 9 themes. Example: poverty-free, healthy, child-friendly, water-sufficient, green, and women-friendly panchayats to achieve SDGs by 2030. In conclusion, the evolution of rural government structures in India after independence reflects the nation's enduring commitment to democratic decentralization and inclusive development. From the initial community development programs to the establishment of constitutionally empowered Panchayati Raj institutions through the 73rd Amendment Act, rural governance has progressively shifted power closer to the people. Despite ongoing challenges such as financial constraints, administrative capacity gaps, and uneven participation, panchayats today serve as vital institutions for planning, implementing, and monitoring rural development. Strengthening these bodies through greater devolution, transparency, and community engagement remains essential for ensuring that grassroots democracy truly shapes India's rural transformation. Thank you, viewers, for listening to this lecture.